Good afternoon. My name is Ericka Lewis, and I am a residential supervisor. I happen to be working in Queens in the 19th floor program, and I'm talking to Assemblymember Zohran. Zohran, please say your last name.
No, it's okay. It's Zohran Mamdani.
And we were just saying how fortunate we are to be in this particular area because we are exposed and allowed to see and experience so many different cultures.
Truly, and I have the privilege and the pleasure of representing Astoria, Ditmar Steinway, parts of Astoria Heights, and the New York State Assembly. And I think one of the most beautiful things about this neighborhood is that it is the landing spot for so many different immigrant communities when they make their way to this country, and it's for the better of all of us in this neighborhood. And I think that I'm really excited to have this conversation around home care, especially as how it pertains to the realities of this neighborhood and just how many immigrant neighbors I have who are struggling with this question of how to age in dignity. And I think that answering that question comes back to the issue of how much are we paying our home care providers and our DSPs. And really interested, Ericka, to get into this conversation with you and learn from you about what your experience has been working in this field and how you think it should inform the legislative action that we take in New York State.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because when you speak of communities, very often people don't even notice the IDD or intellectually disabled community unless they actually work in this field. I've had the pleasure and honor of working in this field for 18 and a half years. My mom worked for the same agency. My adult son received services from the same agency. So we are not only committed and dedicated, we are truly invested in this agency and in this particular group of people. And so I started, I can tell you, 18 and a half years ago. And at that particular time, I was making $10 an hour coming in. And the people that I'm hiring now are starting out almost 20 years later, only $5 more. And when you think about the increase in the cost of living, it really doesn't match and it really doesn't add up. When you consider all the skill and training that goes into the many hats that we're blessed to wear in the service that we provide, whether it's you're doing plumbing or you're cooking, you're cleaning, you're doing laundry, you're providing medication, you are providing counseling, you are driving people places, you're buying their clothes. So anything that you would expect someone would need in their life to have a full invested life, a life that is what our mission is, to live, love, work, and learn in an enhanced way, just as everyone else. Anything that we can provide to allow that, it takes a lot of skill and a lot of training, and we've been given that by the agency. But however, we're losing people, we're hemorrhaging people because they can't afford to stay, unfortunately. We have people who love working with the people that we support here, but they literally cannot afford to have one job if they stay. And for some of them, in trying to fill in the holes for the jobs that we don't have filled in at the moment and maintain their job, they're exhausted. They're exhausted, and some of them have advanced degrees, and their families are saying, this is not what we invested in you for.
Absolutely, and I think that it's such a tragedy that we've let it come to this point where people who love this work are being priced out of this work because the state is not showing them that we value their work. And in effect, it's not showing the IDDD community that we value it, because for it to still be 15 an hour, it's just unacceptable. I mean, when we talk about fair pay for home care and we look into the studies around it, we see so many home care workers who are leaving the industry to go to fast food jobs because in many instances those jobs pay more. And it's a real slap in the face to the work that is being done in this industry. And that's without any judgment or critique of the fast food industry, but it's to say that this is life or death for people, because as you pointed out, the range of responsibilities that someone takes on in doing this work is what allows people to get up in the morning and live through the day and go to sleep at night. And while the governor has definitely improved upon the previous governor's vision in terms of how this money should be allocated and the valuing of this work, it still doesn't meet the actual needs and the demands that these workers deserve. And we're really interested to hear from you about your thoughts on whether you think her vision goes far enough, and if it doesn't, where you think it needs to go in order to actually meet where people are at.
Well, to double down on what you were saying, it's interesting because we hired someone who only stayed for 2 months because they did work in food service and they were making more money and they got more hours, so it didn't make sense for them to stay here. And in kind, although in Manhattan and in New York, we make 15, if you go to Long Island, if you go upstate, they're making less. Mm-hmm. And so you can't afford to have a place to live. You can't afford a car. Things that we consider basic needs, they can't afford that. They can't afford not to work a second job or to travel from place to place looking for overtime, because without that, they can't meet their basic needs. So no, what we're hoping happens actually is that with the fair pay for home care is that we're able to achieve the 150% above, with above minimum wage, because $22.50 is a more livable wage at this point. Considering what I made almost 20 years ago, $10, it would be more comparable. I mean, I don't know if you have ever had an opportunity to come to a group home setting. We'd love for you to come by and see what we do up close and in person. I think you'd love meeting the people that we support here. The invitation is open, but what sort of things have you heard or are you guys doing personally that could really benefit the people who are supporting this community?
Absolutely. I first want to just say thank you for that invitation. This is absolutely something that's on my list of things to do and take you up on in these next few weeks. Because I think that too often in Albany, the issues that we discuss and that we debate, they're conceived of solely in an intellectual way. We're not thinking about the way this is actually experienced. Even when you say $10 versus $15 versus $22.50, we're not understanding how far does that money go or does it not go. And I think that that's where we need the voices of providers such as yourself, especially someone who comes from a family of providers, to tell us, what does it mean to only, offer what the governor currently has in her budget? What would that mean? And so I'd love to hear from you. What are the staffing crises that you're facing at this time with the current status quo? And what would the staffing crises look like if we don't go to the 150% of minimum wage?
Well, we have people who are working with advanced degrees who are on the borderline of working in their field. And so they would like to stay with this particular population. However, they're unable to do it without, say, for example, one of our assistants has another job, and then he's still trying to fill in holes here because we simply can't get people to stay. When you compare what they can make, sometimes joining a maintenance department where the job may be more focused and they don't have to provide, say, counseling, they don't have to give medication, they're not responsible for the amount of documentation our staff are responsible for. You really need to consider the idea that if I could work somewhere else and make more money, and honestly, for a lot of people, it's actually just an easier job. It's easier for them to walk away, even though they do love the field and the people that we support. At the end of the day, they also love eating. They also need to be able to buy a pair of shoes when that happens. We've had staff members, 2 here, who could no longer afford to keep their cars because they just didn't make enough. And we have people who are, unfortunately, I have a feeling they're actively looking because they're saying they just can't afford it. They have other obligations and responsibilities.
And when you see this reality across the work that you do and in colleagues, and what is the impact of all of that, of the instability of the industry on the people that you support?
When people are constantly tired, when they're frustrated. They work very hard not to make that obvious to the people that we're supporting, but their energy is different. They don't have the same energy when it's time to say go shopping for something or take them out in the community, and they want to have it. But if you're working 2 jobs or you're working 16-hour shifts, when you come in, the reality is you just don't have it. So it does impact them, and it does impact their quality of life, because the counselors and the people who are here to support them simply don't have as much to give. You can't pour from into a cup when you don't have anything left to pour, right? So they're doing the best that they can to sustain. The ones who are here, we are absolutely grateful for, but I'm concerned that many of them are saying, listen, I'm doing the best I can, but I don't know how much longer I'll be here. Some of them are being honest.
And the difficult thing is that in this situation, you cannot blame those employees. We cannot be asking people to sacrifice their financial stability to do this kind of work. The state should be incentivizing this kind of work, as opposed to, in effect, penalizing people for taking it on, right? If we're at a point where we're looking at $15 an hour or less, as you said, outside of New York City and upstate, that is in effect penalizing people when the market offers so many other jobs. And you know, you were saying earlier on, you were asking about what it is that we're doing in Albany around this issue, and the focus right now is to increase the drumbeat of the necessity for fair pay for home care. We're trying to hammer home that yes, Governor Hochul's budget proposal is an improvement on what Governor Cuomo had in mind, but it still is in effect penalizing home care workers. And as you said, with these kinds of payment structures, the quality of care goes down because there's simply no way to provide the quality that's required at the rate that's being paid. And, you know, I've thought often about, they say, right, that the demand is going to outstrip the supply of home care workers by 2025. But in 2019, there was already 20% of positions unfilled. So we're already at a crisis point. And while I deeply thank you, and I know that many of my colleagues would thank you as well for the work that you do, the real way that we have to thank you for this work and recognize the work that you do is by passing fair pay for home care, so that you can continue doing it and that you can have the stability around you where you know that coworkers will continue to come to work and want to do this job.
I mean, honestly, it's almost insulting when you see, it's almost insulting the people who are actually coming in, who are inquiring about getting the job, because when you tell them what the wage is, you see the change in their face and in their demeanor. And sometimes they call you back and say, you know what, I've made other plans, or it's not something that I can afford to do. And it's really difficult because you know how important it is to the people that you're supporting, but you also recognize and understand that the people who are considering coming in also have to be paid fairly. And it really is just a fair wage.
Considering that's the thing. It's, and I think it's important to kind of hammer home that as costs have risen elsewhere, in effect, what we're asking for is just the equivalent of what $10 used to do for you back in the beginning. That's what the $22.50 would be doing for people now. It's not luxury, it's not excess, it's simply the bare necessity. So I've really, really appreciate the time that you have given me today and everyone, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you here in Astoria.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will be here soon. There's no question in my mind.
So please, as a follow-up, go to yai.org/advocacy to send a letter to politicians demanding fair pay for home care. It's the right thing to do.